On August 31st, 1987, a rather unique, iconic album was released by Michael Jackson called The Bad Album. I was there from day one until we mastered it at Bernie Grundmann's studio. And what I want to do today is kind of take you through kind of what I call a fly on the wall, what it was like to be in the room when The Bad Album was made. My name is Brad Sundberg, and this is In the Studio. All right, so this is a new way of doing it. We've never done it with a camera before. I haven't even done a podcast in more than, I think it's about 2 years, something like that. You know, during the pandemic, everybody jumped on Zoom and jumped on podcasts and working from home and the whole thing. And then once pandemic was over, a lot of it fell by the wayside, including mine. Our social media has continued to grow. We've done more and more in the studio with MJ events. It's been a really busy year up to this point. And by the time you're hearing this, I might already be in Germany. I'm going to be in Munich, Germany next weekend. But we hadn't done one in a while, and people have been asking, and it's very humbling and sweet when they say, "Man, we'd love to hear you do another podcast." So I thought it's been 36 years for you people that are like in your teens and 20s. I know 36 years seems like 2 lifetimes, which I guess it is if you're that age. It also goes by remarkably fast, and to think that I was part of this group, that I was in the studio with these guys in 2007 when this was released, is amazing. So what I want to do, I literally have no notes. I don't go into one of these, with pages of preparation. To the contrary, to me, it's just more interesting to just kind of go through the liner notes a little bit, and I've got a few tangents that we might go down, but I want to tell you about The Bad Album. The Bad Album, number one, it was not recorded by Brad Sundberg. I was 23 years old, 24 years old when it came out. So I was part of the engineering team. I guess you'd call me an assistant engineer. And I spent a lot of time making coffee and vacuuming floors and cleaning headphones and all kinds of stuff. But it was 4 people that were really, there were a lot of people involved, but there were kind of 4 core people that we might focus on just a little bit. And of course, that's Michael Jackson, Quincy Jones, Bruce Swedien, and Rod Temperton. There were others. Jerry Hay was there a lot. Obviously, Saida and Matt Forger and Bill Wittrell. It's hard to narrow it down, but I don't want to go on for 6 hours talking about the personnel of The Bad Album. So I'm going to kind of stay with those 4 and just kind of go through a couple songs and a couple stories that I think you might enjoy. The album was recorded at Westlake Studio D. Westlake, it's a big studio. It's still a very high-end functioning studio in West Hollywood, California. 7265 Santa Monica Boulevard. I've driven there many, many, many times. Studio D is a big room. It's a big studio. It's a big control room. And it's very comfortable and it's very secure. It's a good place where you can have Michael Jackson. He kind of had his own entrance in the back. On occasion, he would drive himself to the studio. And it's a kind of an easy place to get what you might call celebrities in and out of without causing too much attention. So Michael could get into the studio basically by himself. We had cameras so we could see when he drove up and make sure the door was unlocked, and he would come in. I've talked about this in some of my seminars. A lot of times he would show up early. He would show up about 2 hours early if he was going to be doing vocals, and he would do full vocal warm-ups with his vocal coach, Seth Riggs. And just singing scales, singing and singing, practicing his voice, opening his voice up. drinking hot Evian. And this is, there was more to it, but this is how he would prepare for singing. It was just endless preparation. And I'd be setting up, one of Bruce's microphones, purely, I'm not going to say ironically, because it does have some sentimental value to it, but I'm talking to you in a Shure SM7. This is not the exact same microphone that Michael Jackson used, but we did use an SM7, Bruce's personal SM7, on a lot of Michael recordings. In a lot of ways, he made this microphone famous. If you Google Shure SM7, you're going to find out that it's kind of a broadcast microphone. It's not a super expensive microphone. It's about $400 or $500 in the U.S. But because it worked so well on Michael's voice, it became kind of a famous microphone. And you'll see it won't take you more than 9 seconds of Googling to see the connection between Michael Jackson and the Shure SM7. It was the right microphone for many of his songs. Not all of them, but for many. If Michael was going to sing, he'd get there pretty early. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's kind of take you through a brief introduction of some of the other guys. You obviously know the name Michael Jackson, but Quincy Jones. Quincy had been with Michael since the movie The Wiz. That's, I believe, they probably knew each other before then, but that's when they really worked together, and that's when it was decided that Quincy would produce the next 3 albums with Michael. He was going to do Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. And many people have had lots of, everybody's an expert on everything, but a lot of people have thought, at the end of Bad, Michael and Quincy had a big falling out and fights and everything. And to the best of my knowledge, in all honesty, that's just not true. Quincy did the 3 albums that he agreed to do, and it was done. And Michael was kind of ready to really branch off on his own and work with different production teams. So 3 albums was what Quincy agreed to, and 3 remarkable albums is what Quincy delivered. Absolutely some of Michael's finest work, was on Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. So I met these guys. Michael was working on a project called Captain EO for Disney, and that's when he and I kind of crossed paths for the first time at the studio. I think I met Michael before I met Bruce Swedien or Quincy Jones. Michael's working on Captain EO with Matt Forger, and I was hired as a brand new runner at Westlake, and this was in Westlake Studio A, a smaller studio a couple miles away. And Michael and I did not become best friends, so don't misread into anything I'm about to say. But we were very comfortable with each other. I mean, he was a global superstar, and yet he was also a young guy that loved Disney, and I loved Disney. And we just sort of connected. I could make him laugh, just like Matt Forger could make him laugh. Matt and I are dear friends to this day. And I didn't smother him, I didn't, this was before selfies. I didn't run around trying to take pictures with him or anything. But I went to, my wife and I was newly married to my wife, Debbie, and we would go to Disneyland almost every Sunday night. And it was just kind of our tradition. We would kind of end or begin our week at Disneyland, go on some rides, go have dinner. And on Monday, Mike would ask me about it. I would tell him that I went to Disneyland the night before, and he was just so curious. And he would always ask questions about new attractions. And, did I go see Captain EO? Well, we were still working on Captain EO, but that's kind of how it started. So fast forward to now around that same time, maybe a little bit later, Bruce Swedien and Rod Temperton were working on an album called Running Scared, a movie that I believe was Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal were in. And Rod was producing a lot of the music for that record. And it's a remarkable record. I mean, it definitely has an 80s sound. But that's the where Michael McDonald, has the song Sweet Freedom. There's just some great songs in there, definitely some 80s pop. So that was done at Westlake. And that's kind of when I met Bruce Swedien. Bruce is a big Swedish guy, remarkable engineer. We just lost Bruce a couple of years ago. And I'm Swedish, he's Swedish. So that kind of gelled. I wouldn't say he's a big Disney guy necessarily, but we still had a really good friendship. And I was new, and, there's no question in the music industry, in recording studios, a lot of why you're there is to learn. You want to meet people, meet the right people, and learn. And when I teach in recording schools now, I try and instill that to the students, that when a door opens, man, grab it. Do not miss that opportunity. So with Bruce, he and Michael both, I'll use the word, invited me to watch the new album be produced. And so I would work during the day on a lot of my, as I'm kind of climbing the ranks in the studio, I'm working on Taco Bell commercials and McDonald's commercials and a Stevie Nicks record and some other stuff. But then at night, or whenever I had free time, I'd run into Studio D and watch the Bad Album literally come to life. It wasn't called the Bad Album back then. It was just called The Project. So Quincy is the producer, and Bruce is the engineer. So who's Rod Temperton? Rod wrote about half of the songs on the Thriller album, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I think he wrote a couple on Off the Wall also. Rod comes from the 70s, a disco band by the name of Heatwave. Rod is a brilliant songwriter. He's British. He's from a town in England called Worms. So Quincy in particular, Quincy would call Rod Worms. And I think Bruce called him Worms sometimes also. Rod was very dry. Rod is kind of the invisible man behind a lot of the Michael Jackson hits. If you like the song Thriller, you like Rod. He did very few interviews, to the best of my knowledge. He did not seek the public spotlight at all. He was very dry, very British, had that beautiful, thick British accent, but he'd spent a lot of time in the U.S., and he was just a chain smoker. He would just pound Marlboros, cigarette after cigarette, and just had the ashtray would just be overflowing by the end of the night. But he was brilliant. And you have to understand, I come from... my mom is very musical. My mom's a very gifted pianist and organist. I really don't play music. I hear music. I understand music. Music is kind of part of who I am, but I'm not a musician. So to suddenly be thrown into a room where I'm literally watching Rod Temperton write songs and Michael Jackson sing songs and Quincy Jones produce songs and Bruce Swedien record songs, I won't even say it's Little League to the major leagues. I mean, it's nothing. It's, baseball in a back alley to the World Series. So to me, for me to be there and watch that, I knew my place, and I didn't, again, when I teach students, I tell them that is not the time when you're going to puff up your chest and try to be the expert. You sit quiet and learn. And to watch Quincy was amazing at extracting performances out of musicians, and not even giving a lot of direction, not out waving his arms and telling them what to do. He would just encourage them, and there was endless humor and jokes, and you wanted to be in that room. In any 7 minutes that I could just dash in there and just kind of be in the back and watch was just precious time, because it was so amazing to watch these world-class professionals craft an album. There were other guys, Jerry Hay. Man, I do not, I'm trying to be so careful not to overlook anyone, but this is just a little more of an overview from 36,000 feet of what it was like. So those were the main guys. You've got Bruce Swedien. Bruce's first hit single that he engineered was a song called "It's My Party and I'll Cry If I Want to," and so Bruce is kind of the grandfather. I think he and Quincy are very similar in age. Forgive me, I should know exactly, but They were very similar in age, and Bruce is just this big Swedish force to be reckoned with. And the sounds that he could get, I've watched Bruce mix in many, many, many studios, some of them world class, some of them not world class. And the things that he could do with his fingers and with equipment, and his old JBL, I think back then he was using JBL 4310s for his speakers, and he could just get sounds that no one else could get. And it was remarkable and humbling, and that's Bruce. Rod can write and arrange and write lyrics. It just flows out of him. And of course, we lost Rod a few years ago. So you've got this team. You've got this F1 team. It's funny, I say F1 because I'm not a big F1 fan by any means, but Rod Temperton was, and I'd never even really heard of F1. I'm an American, so we've got the Indy 500, and even that I don't really care about too much. But Rod would stay up until 3 a.m. or set an alarm for 6 a.m. or whatever to watch an F1 race. But you've got that caliber of talent in the room, like a bunch of F1 drivers that were producing this record. So what I want to do is, it's kind of funny because when I look at the liner notes, the first thing I see is the song Bad. I think this has been written about before, but that was called the P duet. P, the letter P. In fact, I think it was either P or it was P-E-E. And it was going to be a duet with Prince. Right from the beginning, to the best of my knowledge, it was always going to be a duet with Prince. That's what Michael wanted to do. Now, you can comment, there have been articles written and stories and all kinds of stuff about why it didn't happen. Should it have happened? Should it not have happened? Prince heard it and basically just said, you don't need me. This song is strong enough on its own. Whether there was something else going on behind the scenes, I don't know. Doesn't really matter. But that was always going to be the P duet. David Williams on rhythm guitar. David played all over this record. I love funk guitar. I am all about some funk guitar. And Bruce had a technique, and I do teach this in some of my seminars, called doubling. Bruce was the king of stereo recording, and many things were either recorded in stereo. We didn't do stereo simulators, but he would do what's called doubling. And he would have, because a guitar is a mono instrument. And Bruce would have David play the entire song. The song Bad, in its original form, is about 9 minutes long. So he'd have David play the entire song, top to bottom, and then double it. We'd go back to the top of the song, and David would have to play those exact same licks all the way through for 9 minutes. And if he made a mistake, we'd go back and fix it. But that gives you, so when you listen to the song Bad and you hear David Williams' guitar, you're hearing two guitar parts. You're hearing one track on the left side, one track on the right side. It's not simulated. It's not electronic. It's a human being playing an instrument twice, almost exactly the same way. This is what I'm walking into. I'm a kid, and I'm watching these pros that are seasoned and just watching them bring this record to life. Then you've got the horns. You've got Kim and Larry and Gary and Jerry. So those are basically the Seawind horns. Those are, I think all those guys were in Seawind. Again, forgive me if I'm wrong. But I didn't know what great horns sounded like. I probably heard, I grew up on Herb Alpert and maybe some Al Hirt and a few things. But hearing these guys being recorded by Bruce Swedien and having horn arrangements written by Quincy Jones and Jerry Hay, amazing. Just absolutely amazing. Those punches that are just so perfectly placed and not interfering with Michael's vocal, not interfering with David Williams. Just brilliant. Chris Carell. Chris is just a unique, sweet guy. I believe Chris lives in Japan at this point. He was our Synclav programmer. Synclavier was this massive digital sampler synthesizer thing. And Michael Jackson had a huge Synclavier, and Peter Gabriel had a huge Synclavier. And there was a little bit of and Synclavier just happened to be right next to Westlake Audio, the old Westlake Audio down on Beverly. And the thing, it was temperamental. You'd almost have to hit it with a hammer. And back then, you'd buy a new RAM board or something and it's like $75,000 for more memory. So these things were just horrifically expensive, and we used it. We used it quite a bit. I think at one point, maybe there was a little idea the whole album would be recorded on Synclav, but that is not the case. It was actually recorded. Oh, brace yourself. The whole album is analog. It's almost all analog on 24-track analog tape. And then it was immediately transferred to digital. So you get that soft analog warm sound. And then we transferred it to digital. Back then we were using the Mitsubishi X850 digital tape machine, digital 32-track machine. What else? I'm kind of watching the clock here. I haven't done this in a while. It's kind of fun. I hope we still have 2 or 3 people hanging on. Then you dive into Paulinho da Costa doing percussion. Just beautiful little Quincy used to call them, like seasoning. Quincy described everything with food and, salt and pepper and, a little squeeze of lemon and that's what Paulinho brings. It's never too much. It's not, generally it's not going to be big kettle drums, but it's just little shakers, some little ambient sounds in the back. That's kind of stuff that Paulinho is going to bring. Man, I mean, you've got John Barnes. We lost John just a couple of years ago. John was just amazing. He went back with Michael way back to Motown, and John's discography is just unbelievable. And he was with Michael during the pre-production over at Havenhurst. He and Matt Forger and Bill Bottrell and Brett Averill did a lot of the pre-production for Bad, wrote a lot of the songs at Michael's home studio, and a lot of them are just pure John Barnes. And he... in a way, John could be a little bit intimidating. I mean, all these guys, you have to understand, again, I'm repeating myself, but I'm just a kid trying to figure this whole thing out, and it's an absolute privilege to be there. And John's like a tornado. I mean, he would just come in. He's funny. He's crazy. And he would just, in a sense, I mean, he loved the attention, and he would just carry on and do basically crazy bits. I was like having a comedian there, and Michael would just roll on the floor. Having John in the room was it just took everything to the next level. John wasn't there every day. You couldn't handle John Barnes. You couldn't handle John Barnes every day. But man, the ideas that he would bring and the talent, I mean, just putting John behind a keyboard and letting him play, just unbelievable. This is all just one song. This is just Bad. There might have to be a part 2 to this whole thing, because there's no way I'm going to get through it. You've got a rhythm arrangement by Michael Jackson. What does that mean? That means that Michael probably... I mean, there were times when he would actually kind of play the drum machine. Back then, I think we were using an Akai MPC 60, and he would play it. I mean, he would kind of do some of the drum grooves himself. And then we would have, someone like, Chris Carell, Quincy Jones. So yeah, rhythm arrangement is credited to Michael, Chris, and Quincy. As far as quantizing and all that, I mean, the machine does a lot of that. But the actual drum grooves, the feel of the song, that's going to be Michael, Bruce, and John. Then we go to digital. I'm skipping ahead. I'm sorry. Horn arrangements, Jerry Hay. We already talked about Jerry. Just brilliant, punchy, tight, clean, beautiful horn arrangements. I mean, no disrespect to marching bands, but this is not a marching band horn section. I guess maybe it is, but these guys their timing is just amazing. That's Jerry and his team. And then on this one, it says vocal arrangement by Michael Jackson. That's kind of interesting, because on Bad, you're going to have 4-part harmony in the background. You're going to have the The choruses are going to be probably 16 tracks of Michael Jackson singing 4-part harmony, 4 tracks per part. It's a gorgeous, very complicated process that we went through. Did Michael come up with all those harmonies? Maybe. I mean, that's what it says in print. I'm going to say that Quincy and Jerry might have contributed a little bit to that, and Rod. I mean, here all this time, I listed all those names. Did you notice that? I listed all those names, and Rod didn't get any credit. So what did Rod do? Rod was there every day, and it's not like he was sitting there, playing a Rubik's Cube or something. He was kind of Quincy's wingman, if that makes any sense. The camaraderie between those 3 guys, Quincy, Rod, and Bruce, they would almost finish each other's sentences. In terms of titles, finances, whatever, because Rod didn't get any writing credit. I could be wrong, but he didn't actually contribute any complete songs to this album. But I know that he was deeply involved in the production of the project, even though Quincy is titled as executive producer. So Rod was there basically every day. Another funny thing about Rod, he doesn't drive. He did not drive cars at all. He said that when he was younger, when the young bands that he was in, might have been Heatwave, might have been before Heatwave, they would drive all across Europe. And a lot of times he was the van driver. And he just was done at some point in his life. He just said, I'm done. I'm not driving anymore. And he didn't. And he would take taxis to the studio. I'd go pick him up. Different guys in the studio would go pick him up. Almost everybody on the Bad album drove Rod Temperton home at one point or another. He'd usually take a taxi in, and then one of us would usually drive him home at night. And a lot of us, I mean, we're in beat up Hondas and little Fords or whatever. And here you've got Rod Temperton, who is worth millions and millions of dollars. And I'm not exaggerating. Rod did very, very, very well on the Thriller album, among many others. And he was just as conversational and friendly and interested. He would be interested in you. And that's a really cool personality trait. When a man that has 4 homes, he had a house in Bel Air, a house in London, a house in Kent, England, and a house in Switzerland, and he's interested in me. He's going off to Fiji and ski vacations in Switzerland, and yet he's interested in me. That's a really cool trait, and that's Rod. Rod had a beautiful way of making you feel important, which I think is really cool. Man, that's just one song, and we haven't even really. And I'm not here to break the songs down or anything, but I want to kind of just give you a flavor of what this project was like. On a daily basis, we would start at 12 noon, and like I said, if Michael's going to sing, he might get there around 10 a.m. I don't want to say that it was like a joke fest, like it was comedians, but Quincy, Rod, and Bruce they're very funny. The jokes get a little bit salty sometimes, but the 3 of them together was absolutely priceless. And they were like 3 brothers that were separated at birth. They were kind of the conductors, of Bruce is in charge. That room is under Bruce's control. Quincy's in charge of the session. He's got all his file folders. I think Jolie was kind of the production assistant on the whole project, and I think she worked both with Quincy and with Michael. Jolie Levine, just a sweet, sweet lady. So Quincy would be kind of calendaring out, for a couple of weeks out, if we were going to get some musicians in, or if it was going to be an orchestra date, or if we needed to get some arrangements on some scores or something. Quincy's deep into all of that. Rod, I'm almost embarrassed to say it. It's not that I don't know what Rod was doing, but Rod was just this presence, and he was just there for whatever Quincy or Michael might need. And they just loved having him there. And then Michael. Michael is, he's still very young. He's fresh off Captain EO, Thriller, MTV, the whole thing, Billie Jean. I mean, Michael's a superstar, but he's coming in, corduroy shirts and black pants and or sometimes almost like flannel shirts. He's always cold, so he's always dressing really warm for the studio. And he's just a sweetheart. He's just this gentle, quiet young man. Michael's 5 years older than me, and you could tell he was at home. You could tell that he loved being in the presence of these people. Now, yes, there were other people there. Craig was there. Craig was Bruce's assistant. Craig Johnson, just a nice, smart guy. Mark Hagan. Mark was one of Bruce's, I guess, proteges, you might say. And Mark was always quick with a joke. And again, a very, very smart young guy. And then Michael's team, you have Miko Brando would be there a fair bit. Bill Bray was still very active in the scene. Wayne and Marcus, Michael's security guys, they would usually come drifting in like around lunchtime, something like that. No, I'm joking, but and Chris Carell was there almost every day at the Synclav. And that was about it. It was just this little band of guys, folks, and we just started chomping through this record. So there wasn't like a big calendar on the wall of we're going to work on this song and then this song and then this song. Michael's still writing. I mean, there's still songs that are coming in. And so even though the album moved fast, Quincy did kind of keep things moving. It was also in flux, meaning, the doors were open if a new song lit up and we need to work on it. There wasn't like a strict schedule of, to the best of my knowledge. Quincy Jones might disagree with me, and I'm always going to take a step back. I love Quincy. I adore Quincy, and I think he's just a brilliant, sweet man. So what we worked on every day, it would change. We'd work on several songs sometimes. In other words, if we're going to have David Williams come in to play guitar, we're probably not just going to have him play on one song. Maybe yes, maybe no. But if we've got 2 or 3 songs that need rhythm guitar, let's just get them all done at the same time. Most of the album is based on drum machines, sequence drums. But we would have guys like JR, John Robinson, come in, and sometimes it would be like drum replacements, or maybe we would have a drum track that was down, and then JR would play on top of that, just to give it more of a live feel. So, The Way You Make Me Feel. So that was one of my personal favorites, and there's no way I'm going to get through all this, so I'm probably going to pull the plug here before too long. But when you're at Westlake Studios, there's this long hallway that would lead basically from Studio C to Studio D. And it was kind of a closed hallway. It was really just, Westlake is closed. It's not like the general public could just pop in there. I remember it like it was yesterday. I would be wrapping up, maybe a project for Lanny Music, or, a commercial or a little session I got tossed on. And I'd get to go hang out with Bruce and Michael and everybody. And I would go down that long hallway towards Studio D. The speakers in Studio D are called Westlake SM1s. And they're these massive 5 or 6-way speakers. They're not as big as a car, but they're maybe as big as the roof of a car. I should know off the top of my head, but I want to say they're about 5 feet wide and 4 feet tall or something. And they're just huge. They're built into the walls. And they produce just a thunderous amount of sound. I'm going to guesstimate that they might be something like 15 or 20,000 watts, something like that. I'd be walking down that hallway, and it'd finally be time to kind of pop in and watch the guys work. And as soundproofed as Westlake was, low frequencies just go everywhere. And I'd walk down that hallway, and I would hear bum 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 bum, and I'd start getting goosebumps because that was my song. I was going to get to hear The Way You Make Me Feel, and you'd open that door, and there were 2 doors. You'd open the glass door, I think it was, then you'd open the sand-filled door, and I mean it was like a movie. The sound would just like blow your hair back. It was so loud. and especially if Micah was there doing a playback. And it was just magical. It was just pure magic. I'd open that door, and it was like I was home. It was like, okay, I'm back. And I would get to watch these guys work. And life was good. And it was one of those times, even at a very young age, I knew that this is a very special place to be. That there's a lot of people within 1 mile, 5 miles, 500 miles of where I was that were not enjoying their jobs as much as I was. And I was at a place where I was watching and listening and learning to something very special being made. And it was called the Bad Album. So I think I'm going to leave it there for now. And we might pick up on this again, because I don't want this to go too long. But I think I want to kind of keep going and take you through a few more of these songs and just kind of give you kind of what I call that a view from 36,000 feet down into this beautiful little studio where these guys made magic. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your patience. It's been a long time since we've done a podcast, and people have been very graciously asking that we do one again. So stay safe, be blessed. I hope to see you soon in the studio, and thanks so much for hanging out with us. All right, take care. In the Studio, the podcast is produced by Maddie Sundberg. Theme music performed by Buddy Nuanez. Artwork by Andy Healy. Studio electronics provided by Golden Age Project, and studio acoustics provided by Acoustic Sciences Corporation. My name is Brad Sundberg. Thanks so much for hanging out with us in the studio.